Chapter 34. The Anvil and the Raven. The heat of the forge struck like a living wall. Alden felt sweat run down his forehead as he held the long tongs with both hands. Inside the furnace, the piece of metal glowed a fierce red, nearly white at its core. The air vibrated with a low hum, as if the metal itself were breathing. Coram stood nearby with his arms crossed and his brow furrowed, watching in silence. At his side, Brune, the burly dwarf who had tried to throw Alden out the first time he saw him, chewed on something with a mocking expression. "It's ready," Coram growled. Alden nodded, swallowed, and thrust the tongs into the furnace. The heat was unbearable at that distance. He seized the incandescent piece of Durkin steel and carried it to the anvil. His breathing became a controlled pant. He lifted the heavy hammer. He struck. The sound boomed like a thunderclap held in check. He struck again. The metal shuddered, blazing with red fury. He struck a third time with all his strength, feeling the hammer vibrate on impact. The entire forge seemed to roar. But something was wrong. Very wrong. The intense red began to fade, far too quickly. Alden struck again, incredulous. The metal kept losing its color, darkening, solidifying without yielding in the slightest. There were no marks, no dents, not even a scratch. He struck one last time, desperate. The piece of Durkin steel turned completely black, as if it had never touched the fire at all. Alden felt the hammer weigh twice as much in his hand. His chest rose and fell unevenly. "What?" he murmured, staring at the metal as though it were some supernatural creature. Coram snorted, his expression hovering between mockery and satisfaction. 10 days, he said simply. Brune let out a deep laugh. "I wonder if you'll learn anything in that time," he added with a sneer, "or if you'll even manage to heat it enough for it to start yielding." Alden set the hammer down on the anvil. His arms trembled from the effort. Coram stepped closer. He took the piece of Durkin in his thick hands and examined it with an expert eye. "This metal doesn't yield just because you want it to," he said more seriously. "Strength isn't enough, heat isn't enough, and haste least of all." Alden pressed his lips together. "Then how do you forge it? What am I supposed to do?" Coram looked at him with a spark of amusement. "Learn," he replied. "Listen to the metal. Know it. If you can't shape it with a hammer, it will shape you instead, and that hurts far more." Alden took a deep breath. 10 days, he had said, and already Alden was no longer sure they would be enough. The dwarf turned away. "Heat it again," he ordered. "From the beginning. If after 10 days you manage to make a knife, even a small one, then you can start thinking about armor." Alden clenched his teeth, took up the tongs again, and returned to the furnace. There was something defiant in that dark piece of metal, as if it were staring back at him, as if it were judging him, and Alden had no intention of losing. The forest breathed with the calm that follows a battle. Moonlight washed over the small rebel camp, caught between clearing and shadow. Kyle, Liana, and Dren moved among the tents, still wearing the dark cloaks they had stolen as they fled the tower. Valor was waiting by the central fire. His weathered face lit up when he saw Selenia. "By all the gods," he exclaimed, "you did it. You truly did it." Selenia inclined her head with quiet composure, though deep weariness hid behind her eyes. Dren dropped onto a nearby log, breathing hard. "It wasn't easy," he growled. "That Riven fellow, he's tougher than a stone wall. My arm's still throbbing." Valor frowned. "Riven? You mean the commander of the Order of Ravens?" Kyle nodded. "The very same." Valor let out a low whistle. "They say he's the finest warrior of his generation, that only a handful of men in Myranthel could face him alone." Dren raised his bandaged arm, wincing as pain flared. "Well, I'm not one of them," he admitted, "and I like to think I'm fairly competent." Liana knelt beside him and pulled one of the bottles of water from the fairy tree from her pack. "Let me see," she said gently. Dren eyed her warily. "You're going to use that on me?" Kyle, standing behind her, snorted. "Don't waste that on him. An infected wound might do him some good. He never shuts up anyway." Liana shot him a glare. "Without Dren, we wouldn't have saved Selenia. This is the least I can do." Kyle raised his hands in surrender. All right. I'm just saying—" "Don't," Liana cut in. carefully pouring a little of the water over the gash in Dren's arm. The liquid shimmered faintly as it touched his skin. Dren clenched his teeth at the sensation, and Lyanna placed her hand over the wound. Her eyes glowed with a soft green light. The bleeding stopped within seconds. Dren's eyes went wide. "It doesn't hurt anymore," he said in disbelief. This is incredible." "I know," Cal said, folding his arms. "The Order of Arendor is famous for its healing arts. I know that firsthand," he added, touching his shoulder. Selenia watched them in silence, wrapped in a dark rebel cloak. Her face was pale but calm. Lyanna rose and hugged her tightly. "Are you sure you're all right? Truly they didn't hurt you?" Selenia shook her head. "I told you, Commander Riven was respectful." Dren snorted. "I said it before and I'll say it again. I'd have given him what he deserved if Kale had left me alone with him for 5 more seconds." Cal rolled his eyes. "You're still breathing thanks to Lyanna. Don't get too excited." Valor looked at them all with a mix of awe and bewilderment. "I can't believe you left him alive," he said. "You had the leader of the Ravens chained and breathing. You could have ended him." Selenia spoke before anyone else could answer. "Sometimes killing is not a victory, and sometimes a living enemy is more useful than a dead one." Valor opened his mouth to argue, but Lyanna stepped in. "The debate doesn't matter," she said. "What matters is that we must return to Alden. He's waiting for us, and we don't know how much time we have before the Order regains its strength." Cal nodded grimly. "We move at dawn. No delays." The camp slowly dispersed as the group prepared for the journey. Lyanna guided Selenia to a nearby tent. Dren checked his weapons. Kyle, though he did not say it aloud, could not stop thinking about the statue of the ancient mage and the strange sensation that had pierced his chest as he left the tower. Something had called to him, something that still pulsed there. He clenched his fist, trying to ignore it. A silent thunder rolled through the darkness. Riven opened his eyes, not in the tower, not in chains, not in the physical world, but kneeling before the throne of Elendor, in the vast hall lit by a reddish glow, a vision, an unavoidable summons. Galathor watched him from the raised dais. His form wrapped in shadow seemed larger than life, as if the darkness stretched around him. The scepter in his hand was dark, an extension of himself. "Speak," Galathor commanded, his voice deep and resonant. "What happened?" Riven lowered his head. "The bearer of the mark did not appear, but one of his companions did. I gave them enough of an opening to believe they had defeated me and escaped. They could have killed me, but I wagered that the Oracle would not allow it." Galathor showed no anger, no surprise, only a dangerous calm. "You acted well," he said. "Sometimes allowing the enemy to advance is part of the game." Riven lifted his gaze. "The Oracle is with them." "Then all is as it should be," Galathor replied. "They will lead us to him, and you will seize him when the time comes." The commander's eyes burned with a mix of fury and resolve. "So it shall be." The vision faded, only darkness remained. From the highest branch of a distant tree, a raven watched the rebel camp. Its dark eyes followed every movement as the group prepared to depart at dawn. The bird tilted its head as if recognizing the trail it was meant to follow. Then it took flight and vanished into the forest shadows. The night fell silent, but the hunt was not over.